Hey, indie filmmakers, I'm Griffin Hammond.
I'm Nick Bodmer, and on this week's episode, we've made plenty of dumb mistakes in our video careers.
That is the truth. So we're telling stories of our worst errors and how we recovered, plus your questions about microphones, technical tips for documentary filmmaking, and if children need release forms to be on camera.
So Griffin, how goes the job search?
I am staying busy. I'm actually in Minneapolis right now in an office building. I just wrapped production on a freelance corporate video.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, paying the bills. And last week I did another freelance project that did not pay me. It was actually for my friend Emily. She was doing an event at the Spotify headquarters, and I filmed her while she interviewed author and podcaster Gretchen Rubin.
Oh, okay. From Happier, right?
Yeah, Happier. That's the name of her podcast. And so she actually inspired this week's episode. She was talking about how she learns a lot from other people's mistakes. Those are the kinds of stories she likes to hear.
They tell these amazing stories about the mistakes they've made. I always feel like I learn better from hearing about people's mistakes.
So I thought, we have mistakes, probably.
A lot, probably, yeah.
In fact, I even made a mistake in that shoot that I'll talk about.
All right.
So the number one mistake that I've made that comes to mind for me was back when I worked at State Farm. I was interviewing the Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan. This was probably in like 2010. And I was using the H4n audio recorder. And do you know what like the biggest design flaw of that thing is?
Oh, I do know what you're talking about. You push it once and it starts monitoring audio and you see bars and you think you're rolling, but you have to push it again before you actually start recording.
Yeah, it's something that luckily they fixed on the new H5. You just push the record button once. But back then with the H4n, you had to push it twice to start recording. And I knew that, but it's still a mistake I made all the time. And I recorded a whole interview with the Secretary of Education, rolling video, but I was not rolling audio at all.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's brutal. I'm looking at my H4n right now. It's what I'm using to record this. And
yeah.
Now I'm double checking myself. Yeah.
Well, and so
we're really rolling. It's good.
One of the things I do now is I always say, especially when I have multiple cameras, I go like, video rolling on this camera, video rolling on this camera, audio rolling. I like say that
out loud. It's like a verbal checklist.
Yeah. But luckily for me, I took the interview back to my bosses and I played them the in-camera audio, and I just told them I haven't synced it up yet. And lucky for me, the interview was actually bad. We just didn't get what we needed out of him. So everyone was like, yeah, don't even worry about it. And I was able to hide the fact that I screwed it up.
Oh, thank God. How bad was the in-camera audio? Could you have enhanced it to get a clip or two out of it if you needed it?
I could have, yeah. But, I could have done some noise reduction. But it was a noisy environment. It was like a busy hallway. This was like an NBA All-Star game that he was part of. So there were all these like celebrities running around the hallway. And so the audio was not great, but it is one of the reasons that I always like to have redundant audio. Like had I run the audio into the camera, I wouldn't even have had the in-camera audio if the mic didn't work or something.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it reminds me, I was shooting a wedding and I decided to buy wireless microphones. I think we talked about cheap wireless mics last week, and I was all excited. I tested it out beforehand and it seemed to be fine, and then I just hit record and let it go. And of course, when I get it back, it's all static and terrible and totally useless. So I also had to fall back. Fortunately, I had a shotgun mic on my close-up camera, which was okay. Not great, but okay. But I ended up having to use that for everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm often cutting in audio from a different source. In fact, I had to do that on Emily's video, the one that inspired this thing. I still made a dumb audio mistake with her project. Like even 7 years later, I'm still sometimes forgetting to push the record button or messing things up. With hers, though, I didn't forget to push it. I was recording audio the whole time. But with my H5, I've been using the same 32 gig SD card for years. And guess how much audio I can fit on a 32 gig SD card?
Oh my gosh. Probably like 100 hours or something ridiculous.
Yeah, I think it's like 30 hours.
Oh,
I mean, I'm sure I could get even more if I was using a lower bit rate. But I do not delete audio files, so I have like 150 audio files on this card. And I look over we're like an hour into her hour and a half presentation, and I look over and the audio recorder is not going anymore, and I realize I've filled up the card finally.
One of those verbal checklists you do, I always format my card before the start of an event. Like while I'm there, I just format it, and then I know they're all good to go.
I should, but I've gotten used to this card being so big and just thinking like, well, why delete things when I could keep a backup on the card?
And now we've learned why.
Yeah. So I popped in a new SD card real quick, kept recording, and it turned out I only missed about 2 minutes of audio. And luckily I was recording lots of redundant audio. I put a Rode VideoMic on one of my cameras, so it was recording audio. I had a Rode NTG2 on another camera, just like pointed up at the speakers. So I was getting audio in other places. And I have some backup that like the Spotify headquarters recorded of the event. So I'll be able to plug that in.
Perfect.
So it should be okay.
Yeah.
But I still feel dumb.
Yeah, and we've all made these little mistakes. And I remember for a long time when I would go to shoot weddings or any kind of event, I'd have this kind of terrible pit of my stomach feeling every time one got started, like what am I forgetting to do, and would run back and forth between cameras even though I just checked it to make sure it was still rolling. It took a long time before I started to feel kind of confident in what I was doing because I was so scared I was going to miss something that you can't ever get again.
I still never feel confident. Anytime I'm doing an interview, I'm constantly looking at the camera, making sure it's still rolling. I like to make sure my audio recorder is facing me somehow. I'll mount it somewhere so that I can see the record light from a distance. I just have to know. I'm checking it every few minutes.
Yep, I know that feeling.
But it is kind of the fun for me of filmmaking, knowing that, like, I feel like I still make a mistake every single time I do this. Like, I'm never perfect, but I kind of enjoy it. Like, that's the fun. There's always a challenge. You're always overcoming and problem solving.
Yeah,
so I just accept that there's always problems.
For me, it's like a nervous but excited feeling. You get that adrenaline going a little bit, and you just, can I pull this off? Especially once I started doing live events solo. Like, it was a lot easier back when we used to shoot together everything and have two people shooting an event because you can split the work up and focus more. Whereas the way you and I shoot solo events now, we kind of have to pre-realize the entire event and set everything up and then just hope we have coverage.
Yeah. Well, and I think as we get older, too, we keep making it more complicated. Like, when we first started doing weddings together, we were shooting it with two Sony Handycams with, like, a shotgun mic, like a Sony shotgun mic that was made for that camera, plugged right into that camera. So you're getting the audio. You don't have to push record on another device. And, like, that was our whole equipment. We weren't even bothering, like, getting nice audio of the officiant or something.
No, not at all. If you could hear it in the back row, we could probably pick it up. But if it wasn't that loud, then it just it didn't happen. All right, what about? I know you've shot some videos with some famous actors. Anything there?
Yeah, I think about one of the first celebrities I got to work with. Maybe was William Shatner back in 2011. I was still working at State Farm Insurance.
Kirk. Captain Kirk.
He was actually great to work with. I learned a lot. He was really nice. This was in 2011. I was making a turkey fryer video with him.
PSA, right? It was like the dangers of turkey fryers.
Yeah, like he had almost burned his house down, I guess, and my job was to go tell his story. And I could have done it like a documentary, but I decided to make this very weird, melodramatic video with him. But we were in the middle of a take. He was doing something for me on camera. I was the shooter, the director. I was going to edit this thing. I was going to do everything. And he did the take. It was great. And I said, all right, let's just get one more. Do that one more time. And he just said to me, like, no. He was kind of offended. He was like, why? Like, I did it perfectly. Like, he knew that he did it perfectly. And I was like, oh, I'll just get one more for, like, coverage. Honestly, I feel like I just knew that I didn't have enough confidence in myself. I just figured, like, I probably did something wrong, and I don't even know if I did. So let's just do it again, just in case. That was just, like, that was my every day. I would just always do takes more than once just in case. As an editor, I want to, like, make sure I have options.
Yeah, you've told me that story. I think you remember saying something that stuck with me. You said if you weren't going to give him new direction, he was not interested in doing it again.
Yeah, that's the way he put it to me. Was like, I'll do it again if you have a different piece of direction for me. If you want me to do it differently, then sure, but I nailed what you wanted, so let's move on. And I'll always remember that. Like, if I'm working with an actor, then I need to be providing real feedback.
Yep. Makes sense. So you did not do it again, I take it.
Yeah, no, we left it there, and it was a great take. Also, on that shoot, I think at one point I told him that he looked at the camera, and he was like, I did not look at the camera. And he was right. He didn't. But it sure looked like it in that moment to me.
He is a professional. Yeah. I like hearing your screw-ups. You're so good at this stuff that it makes me feel better about myself.
So we talked about weddings, and I think about how I made the same stubborn mistake over and over and over again every time I did a wedding. There's always that moment when you're filming the procession.
I know exactly
people are
where
going
this is
down
going.
the aisle, and then
the music comes in.
The bride shows up.
And the bride shows up. What happens when the bride shows up, Griffin?
Everyone stands up. And
it immediately blocks your
suddenly,
shot.
Yeah, this tripod shot that you've set up on the side of the church, you're completely blocked. And so I would always pop the camera off the tripod, and I'd have to go handheld. But it was always like a mad dash to get the shot, because for some reason it's like I would always forget this was about to happen. Did you have a better plan for this?
Well, I did the exact same thing you did. Usually what I would do is I'd be like up close, but on the side, like to the side of the pews, and then the people would stand up and I would be in trouble. Because even with my camera all the way up, my tripod extended as high as it would go, it's still usually, I did not have a good angle with everyone standing up. So just like you said, I eventually just started going handheld, but before I did the whole processional handheld down at the front of the aisle. One of the problems I would have is if you ask permission to do that, they usually tell you no. But if you just start doing it, and nobody cares if you're doing it just while the wedding's going on, it seems normal. So I just stopped asking and started doing it, and that seemed to work.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I really should have been in like the front of the church looking down the aisle if I could have managed it. But for some reason, I was always like behind the bride, like filming her as she I mean, I eventually got better at it. And I think just having more coverage, having more cameras in smarter places, like up high enough to not miss the action. Yeah. You have options.
Well, and you'll find that a photographer is usually standing down at the front of the aisle as well. And so I would always just talk to them beforehand and say, hey, I'm going to be right behind you. I'm going to shoot over your shoulder. So just let me know, if you move up or down, I'll follow you. Yeah. And cameras with optical stabilization really made it more feasible to go handheld like that. So
yeah. Well, and one mistake I never made was I always knew my place in a wedding when it comes to the photographer.
Oh, I think this is a huge mistake a lot of wedding videographers make. You really got to make an ally out of that photographer, and that means being helpful, and, at some point you do have to kind of stay out of their way a little bit, because you're just shooting the whole time, and they got to get in and get shots.
Yeah, I mean, it's annoying when a photographer walks in front of your camera, but you have multiple angles, and you can hide the fact that they were there. Like, let them do their thing, because you are definitely the second most important person capturing stuff there.
And just a handy business tip for anybody considering doing weddings, I got more referrals from photographers than I did from other brides. So by being the videographer that all the photographers liked working with, as I'm pretty easy to work with and I just made sure I helped them get what they needed, I got tons of business from photographers. So,
well, and I always found when I went up to a photographer at the beginning of a wedding and I said, hey, I'm Griffin, I just want to let you know, like, I'm going to do everything I can today to stay out of your way. I know that you are like the most important person here as far as capturing the wedding. They were always like, wow, no one ever says that. Like, thank you so much. Like, they would like say, like, I know we're going to get along. So I think just letting them know that you care about their work goes a long way.
And so, some wedding videographers might take exception to that statement, but I think it's true. As someone who's gotten married, I do think I treasure my photos a little more than the video. Oh, I'm glad I have both.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, maybe not everyone agrees, but... So thinking about weddings, and like, I used to often have GoPros as like a third camera in a wedding, and you put that anywhere. The GoPro has actually caused me some problems. I've done this thing before where, like, I was shooting this thing over the shoulder with my GoPro. I thought it'd be fun to take it into the Vimeo headquarters.
Yep.
And like, let's show everyone my exciting day going into the Vimeo headquarters. So I'm pushing the recording button on and off all throughout the day. And when I'm done, I find that I haven't actually recorded any of the stuff I intended to record. I've actually been
recording the off moments.
Yeah, all the in-between moments.
Now, is this another case? I actually, shockingly, have not ever owned a GoPro. Is it just bad UI where it's not clear when it's recording, or did you just really screw up bad?
Well, I always hated the flashing red light on the front of the GoPro, and you can turn it off, so I always turn it off. But that also means that I don't really know when it's recording. I mean, the best...
Gotcha.
You could see on the LCD, it's either counting up or not. But it's easy to just get off and not notice that it's not recording. I mean, this has happened to me back with like our Sony Handycams, our first cameras. There were definitely shoots where I would have a series of shots in a row that were the in-between shots.
Yeah, that's never fun.
But it was only this Vimeo headquarters video. You could find it online on my YouTube channel and on my Vimeo account. That was the first time when I did an entire video wrong. Like, I think I maybe got like one shot at the beginning, and then I screwed up the whole thing.
Fortunately, it was just a video for you, right? You weren't shooting it for Vimeo or anything like that.
Right. Yeah, it was just a for fun thing.
That's
so
good.
It wasn't that big of a deal.
You ever break any gear?
I have. Luckily, not really anything important. I was just thinking about that. Like, I've never broken a lens on this assignment that I'm on right now.
I'm literally staring at a piece of equipment that you broke of mine.
Wait, what did I break?
Still broken.
Oh, the H4n?
You got it.
Man, I forgot. That thing would break itself, though. I have an H4n, and it's also broken.
So I think I was there. No, yes, I was there when you broke it. You had it out on a mic stand with an arm, like a boom arm.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It wasn't weighted properly, and the whole mic just fell over. And these H4Ns have these little microphones on top.
Yeah, they're completely exposed.
This one is taped with electrical tape back in place because the mic is totally broken.
Yeah.
But it still works.
Yeah, I think you just have to accept when you have a Zoom H4n that in the first year of owning it, you're going to smash the microphones on top. In fact, the H5 has the same little omnidirectional microphones. They call them like XY microphones, right? And but it's removable. And so I just take it off because I don't need it, and it makes the whole thing lighter weight.
And less smashable.
So I was thinking, like, on this assignment I'm on right now in Minneapolis, I felt like I was going to break a really expensive lens. In fact, I took my pre-production GH5 and a really nice lens, and I mounted it to the bottom of a forklift.
Of course, like, you did.
An inch off the ground. And we went pretty slow, but the forklift was really shaky, and I was thinking, man, I hope I tightened that clamp enough, because I thought, if this thing falls, we're just going to run right over both the camera and the lens. But it survived. But the one thing I do break all the time is ND filters. Do you ever use ND filters?
See, I'm bad. I don't. I always need more light. I'm always shooting indoor events, and I'm just like desperate to get more light. The idea of using an ND filter is almost foreign to me.
Yeah. Well, I don't often use them, but when I'm shooting outside and I still want to have some shallow depth of field, I definitely need them. So I'm not like shooting at f22 or something.
Yeah.
If you close your lens down all the way, your aperture all the way, you're going to see all the dust on your lens. So it's pretty nice to be able to use an ND filter instead. And especially with time lapses, I definitely need an ND filter.
You need that short shutter or a long shutter time, right?
Yeah, to get a long exposure, I definitely need to. I always call it sunglasses on the camera, the ND filter. But these things, I've never dropped a lens, but I am always dropping ND filters. I've broken 3 of them.
I don't really think I've broken much gear. I think I'm pretty lucky in that regard.
Yeah.
I can't think of any serious gear I've broken.
ND filters are just fragile. I mean, I do drop things. I'm sure I've dropped lenses and cameras and all this stuff, but it's the ND filters. I only have to drop it from a couple feet up, and they always crack. They always land perfectly on the side, and they crack right down the middle.
All right, what about Sriracha? I know we surely made some big mistakes when we were out there shooting Sriracha.
I actually feel like that film is probably my best work, like least mistakes. But I know that I made one mistake that, I mean, I'm okay with it, but I always think about it. It's that I didn't ask a follow-up question when I probably should have.
Okay, what's that?
We were interviewing David Tran, and all I knew about David Tran, the founder of H4n Foods, the guy who makes Sriracha, all I knew about him was what I had read in print articles about him. And there weren't even that many. There were like 3 articles about David Tran. And one of them had a quote where they asked him about the spiciness of his sauce. And he said this story where people told him to make it milder for like American palates. And he said, no, I'm not going to make it milder. We're not making mayonnaise here. And I thought, oh, that's a great story. So I asked him, hey, did anyone ever tell you you need to change it? And he said, oh, yeah, people told me I needed to make it milder. But I didn't.
And you were looking for that soundbite.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, he could have said that great thing that he told that reporter once. But I just moved on.
Why did you move on? Did you catch it in the moment or did you forget?
I caught it in the moment, but my style as a filmmaker and as an interviewer, I don't want to be obtrusive. I don't ever want to I guess I do feel like maybe an ethical line for me is I feel a little bit weird about making someone do a second take or telling them what to say. I kind of thought if he didn't say it on his own, then I'm not going to force it.
Yeah. But you almost wish you had.
Yeah, I'm kind of jealous of almost anyone else I watch interview would have asked that follow-up question.
Interesting.
It's just like normal interviewing. I think almost anyone I see do documentary would have said something like that. And I just wasn't comfortable.
I can think of one other mistake you made during that production. You booked us a hotel room with only one bed. That was not good, Griffin.
Wait, did we sleep in the same bed?
I think we had to. Yes.
That was just cheap filmmaking.
Really cheap. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
What else?
So a more recent mistake that I made that I feel really dumb about because I feel like I'm better than this. I've come a long way. But I made this video recently. I was interviewing Mandy Moore and some other celebrities like Paul Scheer. I was filming them against a black backdrop, and I even made a YouTube video about this, like the DIY studio look. Set up a black backdrop, use a microphone. I masked out the edges. I didn't even.
The background didn't fill the whole frame, just behind the actor.
Yeah, it was a pretty tiny background, and so we're seeing the edges of it. And I thought I was super smart. I'm masking out the person. You're not seeing the edges of this backdrop. So to me, it looked great. I thought, oh, it looks perfect. What I failed to recognize is that on some people's monitors, when they're watching it way brighter.
Oh, yeah.
Than I was doing it. So you know where this is going?
You can see the masking lines.
Yeah, the black backdrop isn't perfectly black. So I've masked out something that's less than black. And you see these lines going from the backdrop to the true black of nothing. And in some cases, it was pretty stark. I didn't do very much feathering. And so,
so I was just getting ready to ask that question. When you're doing masking in these types of programs, can you do a feather effect like you do in Photoshop? Or do you do it in Photoshop with your PNG or something?
Yeah, no, I was doing it in Final Cut with the built-in masking tools, and you can feather it. But I wasn't doing very much. I was doing just what I thought was enough.
5 or 10 pixels instead. You should have been doing 100 or something. Yeah.
I should have done multiple layers of feathering, probably. Get it done, but then do some more blending, and I just didn't do that.
Big mistake.
So if you turn up the brightness on that
Mandy.
video.
Sorry, you call me next time you need a video. Not Griffin.
And that's just one of the things that would happen to me a lot working in news is that my turnaround times were so fast that I just had to be a little bit quick and dirty like that. It was good enough, but on some people's monitors, it's not going to look great.
Well, let's be honest. The people whose monitors are so poorly calibrated are not people who are going to notice anyway.
I probably could have done a better color correction job. I could have made that black backdrop true black.
Well, I'm disappointed, but let's move on.
So another mistake that I still make today in interviews, I try not to make it very often, but occasionally my interviews are just out of focus.
Oh, well, I bet my shot right now is out of focus. I've got
we've got a video
camera on us. For those who are listening to the audio version, it's on YouTube. And I just focused on the microphone, which is in front of my face. But
Nick, that is lazy. Well, you're shooting with an iPhone, right?
I am shooting with an iPhone.
So you'll probably be fine. I'm shooting with an f1.4 lens right now. So if I were to focus on the microphone that's a foot in front of my face, I would definitely be out of focus.
Well, I think I'm shooting on an f1.8 lens.
That's what but it's also small sensor. So
yeah, I know.
Yeah,
that's what we talked about last episode.
Yeah, but still, especially because I shoot with lenses like this that have a really, really razor thin, shallow depth of field, there are times when I accidentally focused on the tip of someone's nose instead of their eyes.
Yeah, I would have that problem a lot shooting handheld, like out during bright daylight, when it's, especially on the older like GH2 cameras. Sometimes you could barely see what you were shooting because the screen was all washed out and just hard to tell where the focus was.
So do you ever do any like sharpening to fake it?
Yeah, if I have to, though I have found most people don't notice if it's just a little bit out of focus. Do you find that's true? I mean, maybe in TV you probably have a little stricter standards, but
well, I find that the larger formatted it, like if someone's watching it on a giant screen, then yeah, it looks really out of focus. But if someone's watching it on their mobile phone, they may not notice.
Yeah.
But I'll usually, if I've made that mistake, which I do sometimes, I'll just like mask the face, just apply some sharpening to the face, and it doesn't look great. It kind of looks like it's low resolution or something, but it's better than nothing. It can that sharpness can kind of trick you into thinking like, oh yeah, no, it looks a little weird, but it looks in focus at least.
Yep, exactly.
So my biggest, dumbest mistake came at the end of this election cycle.
Would you say it was a huge mistake?
It was a huge mistake that I made at Donald Trump's victory party on election night. It was a long night, and it was a long election. I was covering it for 2 years, and this went late into the night. The Trump people did not know they were going to win early in the night. But at 2:30, Donald Trump finally came out, gave his speech and everything. And when I left the event at like 3:30 and went home, it was like the next day I realized I was missing some gear.
Oh, no. You left it behind?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I left it at the Hilton that Donald Trump rented for his victory party. I left a Rode NTG2 microphone.
Oh.
And I had it in my favorite shock mount that you can't even buy. It's the shock mount that goes with the Azden SGM-1X. It's a cheaper shotgun mic, but I've always loved that shock mount that it came with. So I put my Rode in it. So I lost the Rode, I lost the shock mount. I also left behind a Tokina 11 to 16 millimeter lens, which was like my favorite time-lapse lens at the time. And that is a Canon lens. It's a Canon mount lens that I was using on my Panasonic GH4. So I also had the Metabones speed booster on that lens.
Did you get this stuff back? Did you call the Hilton?
I never did. No, it was later. It was so much later that I even noticed I was missing it.
That's brutal.
But I suppose if anyone out there
somebody got lucky.
came across a wide-angle lens, a Metabones speed booster, and a shotgun microphone at the Hilton in New York City after the Trump victory party, send it my way.
Okay, so we've all made some pretty big mistakes. Is that what it comes down to?
Well, and I think I'm still making big mistakes all the time. So as I continue to look for work, hopefully people will still hire me based on my mistakes.
Yeah, maybe hold off on releasing this episode till you lock down that next job.
But I think the point is, like, maybe except for like leaving $1,000 of gear behind at the Trump party, all of these mistakes are pretty recoverable. I love editing my own stuff because I can usually hide the fact that I made some egregious error.
Absolutely.
In just a moment, we're answering questions about podcasting, whether or not you need release forms for children on camera, and some interviewing tips for documentary.
Hey Indie Filmmakers is brought to you by Tongle.
It's a creative network where filmmakers and idea creators can make money producing cool content for brands. And Tongle has a project right now that is so simple. I would love to see all the people that listen to this podcast. I would love to see all of the winners for this project only come from our listeners. All you have to do is write an idea for a commercial, 250 characters, that's just a few sentences, and the 6 best ideas will each win $500. Check it out at tongle.com or in our show notes at Hey.film.
And Tongle is TONGAL.com.
Our first couple of questions today are actually about podcasting. The first one came from Zoikno on Twitter, who asked me how long we had to wait for our podcast to be approved on iTunes.
It was longer than I expected it to be. I kind of, in my head, assumed it would be instantaneous or near instantaneous, but they must manually curate all of the podcasts in that directory.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the rules are for a podcast. I'm not sure what we could have done wrong not to get approved, but we submitted it on December 27th, and it was approved 3 days later, which actually seems faster than I remember it.
Yeah, me too, actually. I was going to say it was a week, but 3 days is pretty good, especially right after the holiday.
And the one thing we did that I think helped us was we made a promo recording. It was only 2 minutes long, but it was just something so we could start the RSS feed for our podcast, submit it to iTunes, and have something for them to approve. So that meant we were actually on iTunes by the time our first episode came out.
Boom. Good planning, Griffin. Next question from Who Stole My Burrito Productions. It wasn't me. Whoever has Griffin's lens, probably.
Yeah.
He says, we're looking to start a podcast. My question is this: what mic would you recommend to do a podcast?
So today we're actually recording this episode, on 2 different mics. Normally, we both record with the blue baby bottle mic. These are a couple mics I picked up on Cyber Monday. But today I'm recording on my shotgun mic, the Rode NTG3, just because I did not want to travel with my podcasting mic.
Yep, you've already discussed how difficult it is for you to get through security with that particular microphone. So hopefully we sound okay.
And I think, you guys will have to tell us if you like the sound of our microphones, but I do think one of the challenges of recording with the blue baby bottle is that it really picks up everything.
Yeah, you might hear my children screaming in the background, things like that.
I do hear that when I'm editing the podcast episodes. And, it's great, but it's going to pick up every little click of your mouth, all that stuff. I do like the Behringer B-2 Pro. It's a microphone that I used to record the voiceover for Sriracha, so that's another option out there. But I kind of wonder, if you're a filmmaker and you probably need a shotgun mic anyway, I've always thought that shotgun mics sound pretty good, just a foot away from the subject. So maybe if you're going to pick one up, why not just pick it up for both?
Yeah, that makes sense. And if you're just interested in podcasts, I know for those on a budget, the Blue Yeti is well recommended. It's a USB mic, so it's just, it's got a USB connector on it, plugs right into your computer. You don't need a audio interface or anything. So it's like under $100. So something to check out if you're on a budget.
And I imagine, a lot of microphones are really good, and if you put them close to you I think it's probably more important to deaden the room a little bit. I don't know if it's helping, but I have a blanket in front of me draped in this office building, in this meeting room, hopefully just to kind of stop some of my voice from bouncing around the room.
I forgot to do that today, so I probably sound pretty echoey. Oops.
Well, we can just hear the room a little bit. We can hear your reverb.
Hear the room. Lovely.
So I got a question on Instagram from Kristen Amp, or Christina MP. She says she's producing her first documentary in Las Vegas. That's actually where you are, Nick.
That's where I am.
And she has 2 questions. One is what to record sound with on no budget. And 2, how to interview kids without legal ramifications. So let's start with the audio.
Well, if you have 0 budget, then you have to record with something you already have, I would say. So if you've got
an iPhone.
If you're on Instagram, you probably have a cell phone of some sort. That's probably what I would look to use for audio recording and maybe video recording. So it just depends what you've got. I think we've talked about it before, but the cameras and mics in these things are really good these days. Like I said, I'm shooting this shot on it right now, so that's what I would use.
I've never thought about it, but could you use the iPhone headphones as a lav mic?
Sure, absolutely.
you'd probably want to hide it somehow. But I imagine if you got that mic plugged into the phone, hid it up in a shirt or something, you might get some shirt sound. But there's got to be a way to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you just got to get creative when you have no budget. So whatever you've got around, little headset mics or,
I remember early on, I bought one of those cheap lav mics for like $20 at Radio Shack, and we used to plug it into the camera, but the challenge was the camera might be pretty far away. So eventually, I started plugging it into my laptop, and I would have like the laptop hanging out by my feet if I was recording myself, and I would just record into the laptop, like into some audio software.
I seem to recall doing a shoot with you where we used it was a nighttime scene and we needed some blue light and we didn't have any light, so we used a laptop screen with just blue on the screen and held it really close to someone's face just off the camera.
Yeah, we should do just a whole video on the things you can do with a laptop that you wouldn't expect. So her second question was how to interview kids without legal ramifications. You've probably never had to interview children, have you?
No, and so I'm going to defer to you on releases and things like that. What have you done?
Well, so like when I made Sriracha, because it was such a big project and I wanted it to be like my big project, I wanted to do everything right. So I printed out release forms. I found some legal language online that I'm not sure, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know if it was perfect, but I made some minor forms for people under 18 and I made some regular forms and I had people sign them. But I've just always figured the only reason you would ever need a release form is just to prove that someone said yes, right?
I mean, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I am not a lawyer, but it seems like if they're going to talk to you on camera, you have their permission. So
if the whole point of getting a release form is just to prove that someone consented, I think you can also get by with having someone send you an email that says, it's cool if me or my son is in the video. When I was in news, I often would just go up to a parent, and if I wanted to, if it seemed like they were okay with their kid being on camera, I would often just ask them on camera.
Is it cool if I film you have evidence of it then because...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I doubt I'm going to need this evidence. Like, if you're interviewing someone and they're looking at you in a camera, it's pretty clear that they knew what was going on. And it would be hard for them to say, like, I didn't know you were going to put this out in the world.
Yeah.
But, so, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think it's, like, terribly important to get all the legal stuff exactly right. I think just if you do feel like, I wouldn't film kids without their parents' permission.
Oh, definitely not.
Yeah.
All right, next question is from Marcus Ramundal. I probably butchered that. Sorry, Marcus. He's going to buy a new camera, and he can choose either NTSC or PAL. The PAL version being 1080p at 25 or 50 frames per second. NTSC with 24, 30, and 60 frames per second. Any significant disadvantages of filming an NTSC in Norway where they use the PAL standard?
So on YouTube, where Marcus posted this comment, I told him that I think the only reason it would make a big difference is if he was shooting anything for television in Norway.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, on the internet, all frame rates and NTSC versus PAL doesn't really exist, right? Is it all NTSC or is it just not even come into play? I guess I don't even know.
I don't even know, but I mean, YouTube can handle all sorts of frame rates. So if you want to shoot 24 and 30 and 60, then I say get the NTSC version. But you could run into problems if you were shooting everything in 60 and suddenly Norway television said, oh, this is a great project. Can we put it on TV?
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't be a huge deal, but you would lose some frames and it might look a little bit worse. Our final question today comes from an email from Brendan Donnelly. We've answered one of his questions before. And he was saying that in interviewing people, sometimes he'll actually make a mask and blur out the background a little bit more than the camera was getting. And he's asking, is this amateur?
Well, I think it is technically an amateur technique, but it sounds great. I mean, if it looks good and kind of gives you that separation and makes your subject pop, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would be worried that you might not get the feathering just right, and there might be a little edge around the person, or maybe there's there's gonna be a fuzzy blurriness to the edge of the person. It's one of the reasons I don't like shooting in small offices. That's what he mentioned, that he's shooting in a place where you can't get a lot of depth. It's hard to throw things out of focus when everything's really close to the subject. So I usually, like in this corporate job, I was taking people out of their offices so I could see a lot of depth to the office and get it really out of focus. But I wouldn't be surprised. I'm sure I've done that. Maybe, I don't think I've ever put a mask exactly around a person, but I've definitely taken some objects in a background and kind of blurred them a little bit more. Maybe blur the edges like a vignette a little bit.
I used to love putting vignettes on all my videos. I think finally you convinced me that not every single video needed a vignette on it.
Yeah, well, you went a little heavy on it. I did even on there's a wedding video I did where I did a vignette on every shot, and the problem is it looks pretty good on most shots, but then things like where there's a really uniform background, like if the sky is there, it just becomes really apparent what you're doing. And if there's several shots in a row where you see it, you're like, oh, I feel like I'm looking through a screen.
Yeah, it's like stapled on top.
Yeah. And if it's really bad compression, which can sometimes happen on YouTube or Facebook or something, you'll get that banding.
Yeah.
Where it actually takes that wonderful gradient you've created and it makes little like
Smashes
stripes.
It. Yeah.
So,
well, I stopped doing that thanks to your excellent advice.
I mean, I think my advice is to not do it to an entire video, but I have used it. I still use a vignette occasionally. I'll probably use it in this video I'm making right now for this business. I'm sure there will be some shot where I want to draw the viewer's attention a little bit more to the middle, and a vignette can do that. So I use it on a shot-by-shot basis.
Very good.
So I want to thank Emily for letting us use audio from her event with Gretchen Rubin. And I also want to apologize to her for messing up the audio recording. I'm sorry, Emily. Can I make it up to you by letting you promo your podcast?
Oh, well, hello, Griffin. Sure.
It's called
Resident Tourist.
And someone else I know is on the podcast.
It's me.
That's my wife, Amy.
I'm Amy. I'm also on the Resident Tourist podcast.
And it's a podcast about your lives in New York City, right?
Well, Amy and I are both from the Midwest, and we now live in New York. And it's about our adventures in the city and our advice on
What it's like
how to deal with it.
Live in a city and sort of always feel like you're a tourist in the place you live.
So if people want to check out your podcast, where can they find it?
We have a website, residenttouristpodcast.com. And we're also on SoundCloud.
And you have an Instagram, right?
And we have an Instagram, Resident Tourist Podcast.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Be sure to check out this week's show notes at Hey.film.
And whether you're watching these podcast videos on YouTube or catching them on iTunes, Overcast, etc., thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Sorry, I don't have good feedback for that.
I was trying to come up with a way to lead you into your lost gear.
Yeah.
But why don't we try that again?